Thank you everyone for coming. I'm Brenda Murray and I'm chatting today with Ian Fennelly. Ian will take questions. You can send them to me on Facebook Messenger, find Brenda Murray profile, and to send me a question in the profile. For those of you who don't know Ian, which is probably no one in this call, Ian is a very talented UK-based urban sketcher and artist and an educator in the British school system with a huge body of work and online classes. And today Ian's going to be talking about urban sketching, the at-home edition. So welcome, Ian.
Thank you, Brenda. That was such a lovely introduction. That was really nice. That was so sweet. Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. I would say it's lovely to see everyone, but I can't see any of you at all. But I hope you can see me okay.
Yeah, we can see you crystal clear.
Fantastic. Okay. So what should we start off with then? What should we talk about first?
So we're in a horrible situation now. We're all stuck at home, and that's the reason we've set up these online chats, so that people can be encouraged and can sort of think outside of the turn off the TV and the horrible news for a few minutes and get inspired and get encouraged with your art today. So how's it been going for you? What have you been up to? How's your sketching these days?
Obviously my life's been turned upside down a little bit by this kind of worldwide blockage on travel. I had loads of really cool trips planned, and so they've obviously all been cancelled. So you have to start adapting, don't you, to the environment that you're faced with. So I've been doing a lot of work from home. I've been making lots of videos, lots of films, doing quite a few live streams, and just keeping myself really busy in the studio, because in the UK we're allowed to go out for one form of exercise a day, and then we can go off to the shops and things, but we're not going out too much really, because we're doing like a lot of shopping kind of online. So I'm getting out about once a day, and then the rest of the time I'm just ensconced in my studio, just working and keeping myself really busy. So I went through a phase a couple of weeks ago of doing urban sketching home editions. Cool. which has been great. And it was like, as soon as my first trip got cancelled, which was the Texas one, and then I found out another one was going to go, I thought I need to go on a trip somewhere. And the only trip I could go on really was my house. And I've been living in this house for quite some time. I've been here, over 20 years. And it was great because it was going around the house and just discovering things all over again, because you're drawing things from different angles and you're seeing things differently. So that was great fun. That was really good fun. And then I was kind of also inspired by a lot of work I was seeing other people do on the different Facebook groups and on Instagram, and everyone seems to be doing it all of a sudden. It just kind of forces you, because the circumstances are different, it forces you to start looking at different things in different ways and focusing your mind on perhaps smaller things instead of bigger things. But when you do that, you discover all sorts of amazingly rich and interesting shapes and patterns and stuff like that, and it's been great. So I've been really busy. In answer to your question, I haven't really stopped, but I don't know how long I can continue. If it goes on for like another 3 months, I might start banging my head against the wall.
I think we all will. Well, you know what we'll do, we'll turn the tables. You can interview me, and you can ask me really hard questions.
Okay, we'll do that.
Let's have a look at your sketches, some of the sketches that you've been doing. I'm going to share my screen and we'll open up some of your sketches and have a look there. Exciting.
Well, this was the first one I did, and this was really before I planned on doing a whole series of them. This was just me one day sitting, watching the telly, getting really bored with watching TV and thinking, what can I do? And I thought, let's just draw the living room. And I hadn't really planned on spending that long on it, but it was a big piece of paper I started with. It's like 40 by 40, so it's bigger than normal. And this is one of the good things about working inside. You don't have to take all your stuff with you. You can kind of just have it there, so you can kind of work on a bigger scale. And I just started off literally drawing what was in front of me. And I suppose your mindset starts, you start thinking to yourself, well, this is almost like drawing outside, except the ceiling is the sky.
Right.
You don't get cracks in the sky, obviously, and I don't get that many cracks in my ceiling. So I've kind of slightly exaggerated.
I think you might do a little bit of a home repair there, Ian.
You know, it was so sweet because when I posted it on Facebook, loads of lovely people were saying you need to be so careful with that ceiling, Ian. It looks like it's going to come down. And so my reply was, well, it was a little bit of artistic license, really. It's not
Yes.
quite as bad as it looks. I've just kind of exaggerated it a little bit.
Oh,
But
that's so funny.
you start looking at shapes like you would do if you're outside, and things like doors become buildings, and carpets and parquet flooring just becomes, you know, cobbles and pavements. And so it's almost like, even though you're inside and everything's a lot closer and smaller, you're still approaching it in the same way. It's still visual recording.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is more intimate, and the other kind of practical thing as well is, you know, you don't get cold, you don't get strangers coming up to you, you know, sticking their face in your page and asking you what you're doing, or asking you for money, or all the kind of things that, you know, you sometimes get if you're drawing out and about. I mean, I miss the company, I miss the people that I draw with, and the interaction with the public, but you don't get any kind of distractions. You know, you can just completely lose yourself in it, and also you can discover things. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you can see things as well that you've, for years and years and years, you've taken for granted. I mean, I didn't realize how bad my ceiling was.
Oh, that's really good. I have a question for you from Barbara, and she says she especially enjoyed your sketch of the Alamo that you did a while ago. And
Oh,
she
Barbara.
says, do you have a particular starting point for each sketch, or is it different each time? And maybe, you know, we could apply that to an interior sketch like this. You don't
Yeah,
usually do
yeah,
interior sketch.
yeah. There is the starting point is always the big shapes. So if we ping another one up, I'll carry on talking. If you ping another one up on the screen, I'll explain exactly to Barbara where the starting point was. But there always is a specific focal point or starting point, something which you can kind of hook the whole of the composition into, really.
Yeah.
And it could be a very kind of dominant shape, or it could be a particular line that cuts across.
Mm-hmm.
So this was the second one I did. This is my kitchen, and I'm sitting at the breakfast table, kind of looking out. So the starting point for that one would have been the windows, the French windows that you can see, which is basically a square. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually a rectangle, but I turned it into a square. And that kind of populates almost the center of the page. So I would have marked those out, first of all, really lightly, just with the brush pen, and then everything fitted around it. So around that rectangle stroke square of the French windows becomes another one, a bigger one. And then that then enables you to kind of shape out the flooring and all the terracotta tiles, and then it brings you all the way down to the bottom as it then creates the table where you've got the teapot and the cup, and then you go back up again, you go back up to the top, and then maybe do the French windows at the top. So everything kind of is centered around that initial kind of shape.
Wow.
But you're still working in very, very simple lines.
Yeah. I'm getting to know Ian in a way that I never knew you before. It's a nice kitchen.
It's very tidy. I mean, and the other thing as well is I do lots of editing. I mean, people who've seen me work on location, you know, I do a huge amount of editing all the time. Some people call it cheating. I call it editing. So
Yeah.
you're basically editing things out. So if you look at the sink on the left-hand side, I mean, that was full of dishes and stuff like that.
Right.
And I thought, well, I could draw them, but it would take me ages and ages to draw them. So the easiest thing is just to not put them in. And the beauty of that is it's like you're winning on several levels, because you're kind of saving time, and it also creates the image that your kitchen is just so tidy.
Yeah, except, you know, it looks a bit like a murder scene because you forgot to wipe up the blood splatters.
Yeah, I know. But do you know what's lovely about doing these as well? And this works outside as well as inside, is that when you start drawing a scene like that, and it's very much to do with observation, because you're spending a lot of time looking at something, you completely switch off.
Mm-hmm.
You totally switch off. You kind of just in that moment. I mean, that moment could be 2.5 or 3 hours, but you're just thinking in that time, and you're not worried about the big world picture. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you're not thinking about, you know, are they going to get a vaccine? Are flights going to start happening again? Are people going to get better? You know, is the world going to come back to normal? You're just not thinking about that. You're just thinking about your immediate environment. And the thickness of the pen that you're about to use, or the color that you're about to, record. And I think that's really, really healthy for you to live in the moment. And art enables you to do that. And I was reading something the other day about David Hockney, who's in
Oh,
Normandy at the moment. And he was talking about how a lot of people feel really stressed at the moment, quite rightly. Everyone is super, super stressed. And stress often comes about because you're worried about the future.
mm-hmm.
But when you're drawing, when you're making art, you're not thinking about anything other than what you're doing. You're totally engrossed and you're living for the moment. And I think that's why it's so good to distress you, because you can just take yourself off into another world. And I found that when I've been drawing, especially around the house, and discovering new things and new shapes and new angles, and imagining like a guitar would be kind of like a doorway, an old doorway, because it's kind of the same scale, and it's the same, in the same position as a lot of the views that I would normally do. So you can almost imagine yourself, you working away and you're totally engrossed in the moment. And it's so kind of distressing, you just forget about the world, the big world picture, which I think is really, really cool.
It's true. Your mind just goes to a different place, and you're not thinking about all these things. You're doing some problem solving, trying to figure out what to include, what not to include in your sketch, and how you're going to do it and what colors you're going to use and so on, which is great because it's not coronavirus.
It keeps you mentally active as well, Brenda.
Yeah.
It keeps your mind going, because what's the alternative? You park your bum on the couch and you just watch crap TV.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, that's the alternative, isn't it? Well, it would be for me anyway, because art's just always been my life. It's a thing that I love doing.
Yeah.
So these home editions have been great because it's enabled me to kind of focus my mind on something different.
Yeah,
which is brilliant.
It's super. Let's just pause for 1 second. And the reason is because I realized that I think I forgot to turn off Facebook. And so when people are asking me questions, it's pinging up every single time. I'm hearing ping. All right, so let me I turn that off now. So I'll only hear it on I'll only get that on my phone. All right, so I'm going to move on to your next sketch. And as I'm pulling that up, there's another question. Somebody just wanted to know if you had any tips for how people can keep their sketch loose.
Okay. Wow, that's a hard question. How do you keep your sketches loose? You see, I don't think mine are particularly loose. I think they're actually very tight and very detailed and they're very precise. I mean, the painting can be quite loose, but I know kind of exactly what I'm doing and where it's going, and it looks a bit splashy, but that's all kind of always done sort of on purpose. I mean, maybe one way of answering that question is just to be very mindful that you want to have as much fun and you want to invest as much sort of entertainment for yourself, entertainment value for yourself in that time. So if you're going to be drawing or painting for 2 hours, you want to make it as super fun as possible. So don't worry too much about painting inside the lines. Paint outside, paint above, paint below. Let the lines and the colours and the washes kind of work together in harmony, and just be very, very playful. So when I'm drawing, even when I'm running a workshop on location, my mindset is that I'm going to have as much fun now as possible. And hopefully my enjoyment becomes infectious. And that naturally enables me to be loose. Because if I tightened up, I'd get bored. I'd lose interest. So I just keep everything ticking along all the time, keeping it loose, keeping it fresh, keeping it dynamic, and keeping it kind of, personal and energized for me. I think it's more, rather than a stylistic thing, I think it's more like a state of mind. It's a kind of mental approach. Keep it fun, to keep things ticking over. I mean, if you ping one of the pictures back up on the screen, perhaps that last one of the hallway, kind of explain in a little bit more specific detail what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Do you know what I learned about from you when we were filming the Layers of Looking online video is that you are it's all about the line at the end, that stage 5. You're really tight and you're very specific and you're really working that line and thinking a lot about the line, but it's your watercolor that's so loose. Yeah.
Because what I don't want to do is I don't want the watercolor to fill in the shapes.
No.
I don't want to become like painting by numbers or like a coloring book. It's not an adult's coloring book. So the line work and the paint work they both have a life of their own. So the
Right.
line, what's happening is the line work is describing what you can see in front of you. So the line work can be quite objective. So the composition, the structure, the perspective, the contents, in terms of what you see, is very objective because it's based on what you're looking at. But then the colour is often about what you're feeling. So the colour is the kind of autobiographical side of it. You know, it's bringing yourself, it's bringing your personality out. A lot of it is to do with what you can see. So, for example, if I did a parquet flooring in my house, I would have to kind of do a variation on brown. But I'd probably whack like a load of rose, yellow, and orange in there as well. I mean, I wouldn't do it green because that would just be silly. But there's a lot of emotion going on, which keeps it all fresh and kind of dynamic, really, which yeah, which just keeps it interesting. All the time, you know, you're trying to make it super, super fun for yourself. So if you look at that parquet flooring, there's so many different colours and tones going on in there to keep it visually exciting and visually stunning, because there's an awful lot of white going on as well. If you look towards the top of the picture, all the walls and the ceilings are purposefully kept white, as is the door and the stairwell as well. So the colour, although it's very loose, it's actually quite tightly controlled in terms of where it goes and where it doesn't go. And then when you look at the bit under the stairs, there's lots and lots of grey tones and blue tones and browns, all kind of mixing in together, really, just to make it visually interesting and exciting.
Right. Yeah. I have another question here. Someone says, Thea says, if you work on a 40 by 40 inches, question mark, are you on an easel and do you change brushes compared to a smaller painting?
Okay, that's a really good question. No, I don't work on an easel. I always have it on my lap. So it's exactly the same way as I would be if I was on location. So this 40 by 40 sketchbook, I've not taken it outside yet. I'm hoping to take it to New York in October if the country lets me in, but I'm not convinced that's going to happen. I'm hoping it will. So I'm thinking of taking it to New York in October, but normally it's 30 by 40, but this particular one that I'm using inside, you know, I just have it on my knee, and I don't use any bigger brushes. All the brushes are exactly the same as what I'd normally use on location, as are the pens and the brush pens. So everything's just a little bit, I've got a little bit more space to work with. So again, if you look at the one on the screen, you can just make out towards the top the balcony on the first floor. Now, I wouldn't be able to get that in normally on a 40 by 30. And also in a lot of these urban sketches, the home editions, you often see like a light coming down from the top. So you've got like a ceiling rose in the ceiling. And again, you wouldn't be able to see that because it would just be cut off. So going back to kind of like the idea of the whole, the ceiling being the sky, you can just populate more stuff at the top because it gives you that extra 10 centimeters above. And I think the square format just works really well for an interior. Whereas this is the sketchbook here. I'll just hold it up. That's the actual sketchbook.
Yeah, it's Fabriano, right?
Big baby. No, it's not. It's not Fabriano. Fabriano don't do 40 by 40. This is Smoltz. So it's SMLT. It's like Smoltz, but it hasn't got the vowel in. They've taken the A out. And they're based in Lithuania. And they made this sketchbook for me, and they're really cool people.
Can you buy it on Amazon or?
Probably, yeah. Just tap in Smoltz. It's SMLT. Not Smaltz, but small. In fact, do you know what? I don't even know how you say it. I've got no idea. It's Smoot. Eastern Europe, so it's probably Smoot, something like that.
So Ian, somebody is asking, they said, your style perspective is so different from what we've learned, yet so beautiful. Is there a name for it? Not everyone can do it.
Well, there's perspective and there's like not perspective. So there's correct perspective and there's incorrect perspective, I suppose. I mean, my perspective is probably, if you want to label it, it's probably slightly exaggerated perspective. And the reason I slightly exaggerate the perspective is partly because I don't really think about perspective. I just draw it and kind of do it and just hope it kind of works out. And I'm really lucky because it always does seem to work out. So I'm not really conscious of perspective, but what I am conscious of and I'm very mindful of is the the way in which I want people's eyes to roll around my picture. So if you ping another example up, and I'll explain exactly what I'm talking about. So as an urban sketcher, home edition at the moment, which is my specialism, I want to control what people can see. So this is a great example. Okay, this is the top of the stairs looking back down. So you can just make out at the bottom of the stairs the doorway and the porch, which I drew in the previous one. So on the previous one, I was down the stairs, just to the right, looking diagonally across the hallway. So now I'm at the top of the stairs, just outside the bathroom. Now the perspective in that, I think, is accurate, because all those lines would converge on an imaginary vanishing point. But I'm not aware of that. I wouldn't mark the vanishing point, because to me that would just be boring and it becomes too technical. I'd rather just draw all the lines and keep my fingers crossed, and hopefully it all kind of works. Because what I want to do is draw people into the picture and get them to imagine themselves walking down the stairs, or going over to the right and going into that other doorway, or going across the other side of the banister and looking out the window, or dropping down the stairs and going in the doorway. So you're trying to control people's experience of looking at your picture all the time, and that's why the perspective to me has to be right. But it's not something I'm consciously grappling with. I just kind of do it, and it just seems to work. But what I'm much more conscious of is the use of space around the picture, and how things, fit into the edges. So if you look at the very top of it, you can see how the lantern just hangs down from the top, and then at the bottom, that bottom step just cuts down at the bottom, and then the little light switch on the right hand side, and then the little bit of dado rail on the left. So that's what I'm more mindful of, how I populate the content within the space that I've got available to me. And the perspective, I think the other thing about the perspective as well, which is probably fair to say, is the plumb line, the anchor line, which the horizontal banister, which is almost at eye level. That would be probably one of the first things in a drawing like this that I would put in. So once you've got that in, that horizontal, which is the one that just below the window on the first floor, once that goes in, all the other lines would come off that. They'd go above and they'd go below.
Right.
So yeah,
I think if you're an expert, as you are, with perspective, then you can play with it, and it looks deliberate, and it looks like, oh, this person has played with perspective. They know what they're doing, but they played with perspective. But if you're not really familiar with perspective, then it can look wonky.
I think I don't really teach perspective. I do it, and sometimes we have to kind of specifically address it in certain situations if a building or a scene requires it. But I find with perspective, because it's a technical thing, there's loads of great little YouTube clips you can go on. So anybody who's struggling with perspective, just go on YouTube, have a look at some of the clips. It's not something I'd ever address, because I'm not kind of technically orientated in what I teach and what I do. Mine is much more to do with the experience and the moments, and being confronted by all this amazing imagery and how you break it down. So perspective is part of what I do, but it's not a big part, and I don't really address it specifically. Partly because I don't find it interesting. It just doesn't pull my chain.
Yeah.
Storytelling I'm about storytelling. I tell stories.
Well, I find perspective interesting, and I hope to be releasing an online workshop about perspective as soon as I finish editing all of Ian's workshops that aren't about perspective.
That's what I need. I need to come on that, and then I'll be able to do it properly.
I have another question for you here, Ian. Somebody is asking, when is your watercolor applied? Okay.
So do you want to pop one up on the screen again? Yeah. And I'll talk through it. Yeah. And explain when it goes on.
There you go.
So in my the method that I use, and the method that I teach on location when I'm running workshops, is that we start off with the big shapes. So we mark everything out just using, say, a brush pen. And we're not really thinking of the content, we're just thinking about the really simple shapes and lines and how it's broken up on the page. Then we'll probably go with a little bit more detail using like a permanent fine liner. And so those first two steps really give you the structure, the contents. You've broken up all the area. You've gone from the very top of the page to the bottom of the page. So in this particular one, we would have marked out the banister, the railings, the door, the lamp, the steps, the window, but none of the detail would have been in. And then we whack the colour on. And the colour is, as I said before, it's to do with real colour, so localised colour. So for example, the brown of the banister and the sort of blue looking through the window. But then there's the kind of emotional colour as well, the colour that the picture then needs, and perhaps the colours that you're feeling. And that's often to do with your energy levels, or how confident you're feeling, or are you down, are you up? And so the emotional colour is a really big part of it.
Can I ask you a question about that, Ian?
I knew we'd get onto colour. I just knew we would get onto colour. We always default to talking about colour. And I said at the beginning, no hard questions about colour.
Okay, well, I don't know if this is maybe it's a hard question for me, but maybe it's not a hard question for you. But how do we get in touch with our emotions in terms of putting color on? Like I tend to be, me personally, more of an analytical thinker, and so it's really hard for me to think about my emotions when I'm applying
it's so
color.
much easier for me to explain if we have a picture.
Okay.
So if you put a picture, put a different one on, and I'll explain exactly the colour journey on this, because there's always a colour journey. Okay, not this one. We've talked about this one.
No, we didn't.
Okay. So I'll talk about the colour journey on this one, right? So this is my living room. This is the same one that you saw at the beginning, but it's looking in the opposite direction. Okay, so it's the same fireplace. This time it's on the right hand side. So I've drawn all the big shapes. I've got all the content in, but I've not put the detail in, and I'm about to put the colour on. So my starting point would have been the parquet flooring that you can see, which is kind of that burnt sienna type of colour. And then probably the next colour would have been the red brickwork that you can see, which is kind of that colour as well. But then the blue going up the wall is more to do with balancing out what I've put down already. So because I've put the kind of the warm brown on, I want to kind of accentuate that, or enhance that, or complement that, whatever, however you want to call it, by putting that blue going up the wall. And once the blue goes on, the blue then says to me, well, you need more blue, but let's go for a real kind of warm blue outside. And that's where the emotion comes in. That's when you're talking about the inside and the outside. That's when you're kind of channeling things like living in the moment and being stuck inside but wanting to go outside. So that's where the emotion comes in. But you don't know that's going to happen until you start off on that colour journey of actually referencing something quite specific. So you've just got to kind of let it go. Then you go up to the top and you see you've got the architrave going around the top, and then that's to balance what went on at the beginning with the burnt sienna. Then you kind of go around the mirror as well, a little bit of blue pinging down the side of the mantelpiece, just to kind of to communicate with the blue going outside the window. And then if you look at the carpet, the rug, you've got loads of little bits of pink inside there as well, just to give it a little bit of warmth coming forward.
Right.
So that's that colour journey, but every colour journey is different. But what I try and teach on location is that when you start off looking at something, there's got to be something quite specific in front of you, something you can actually see and almost copy. And then that lasts about 5 seconds, and then all hell breaks loose. Because you've got to let the paint, you've got to let the watercolour speak, communicate, sing, dance, play, mess around, and you're just pushing it along. You're just letting it do all of those sorts of things, and it's great. It's great. Otherwise, you might as well just have a massive, big colouring book, and you swim in the shapes.
Yeah,
and life's too short for that, especially at the moment. We've got to have fun.
So, Ian, lots of questions about color. People want to know what a brand. Our lovely friend Santi Sales from Barcelona is on the call, and he wants to know, what watercolor brand do you use?
Okay, I did actually mention this last time in the last live stream, when I went through, how all the colours are set out. Shall I do that again?
Well, he's asking brand.
Well, I just use Winsor & Newton.
Okay.
I use Windsor. I mean, I've got loads of other brands because I'm given lots of other brands, and I do use other brands sometimes when I'm kind of like when I have to use them, and they're great. They're really good. But my favourite one that I kind of use pretty much all the time are Winsor and Newton, and I've always used them. I've been using them for a long time. Now I know there are other brands that are supposedly better quality, but to me they just don't do the same job, and I think they just sit brilliantly on the page, on the paper. So when I'm using the Smooth Fabriano, they just sit beautifully together.
Yeah.
And sometimes for certain colours like emerald green. Now, when I was meant to be going to Ireland to do workshops, and I wanted, the idea was that every picture was going to have an emerald green, a little tiny ping of emerald green in it, which would have been grand for Ireland as well. But you can't get that. You can't buy that in Winsor and Newton. So I dipped into Old Holland,
Yes.
and I used a lot of Old Holland as well. So sometimes I kind of supplement the Winsor and Newton with a few kind of Old Hollands as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't want to repeat what we've done in previous interviews, and in our last interview, which is already posted on the Studio 56 Facebook page and on the Studio 56 YouTube channel, we already talked about your palettes, and you showed your palettes. You put them all up and showed where they're placed and everything.
And how they're all set out. Yeah.
So okay. I think for those people who are asking about watercolor palettes, if you wouldn't mind to check the last video, and you'll get some really good information there. So, okay, Ruud Otten from Amsterdam is asking, do you sometimes get out of... I know, hi, Ruud.
Hi, Ruud.
It's our buddy, great guy. He says, hi. He says, do you sometimes get out of your comfort zone by experimenting?
No, never. I experiment all the time, but I never feel out of my comfort zone. In fact, I try and put myself out of my comfort zone sometimes to make it exciting, to make it interesting. So sometimes I'll literally pour the paint on. I will throw the paint on and make it super messy and super splashy, and just to, I suppose, challenge myself as well, because I need to keep it as exciting and as interesting and as buzzy for me as possible. So I kind of try and choose tricky subjects, tricky angles, complex compositions, really push the colors, really push the boundaries of the colors, and push kind of how much space you can leave in the picture as well, and how you populate the page with real intense bits of detail and really spacious areas. So I do really challenge myself, but I'm never in the position where I think I can't pull it off. I mean, sometimes it might look like I've made a right complete mess of it, but I don't know. I think as an artist going forward, you've got to really challenge yourself and push yourself and push your boundaries and experiment. But I never feel like I'm out of control. I always feel I know where it's heading, and I think that's because I've got lots of little tricks in my bag. I've just got a whole suitcase full of tricks, little visual tricks. So, for example, when we were in New Orleans, one of the workshops we were doing was at the Commander's Palace. And for me, my drawing, not the workshop was going great, everyone was loving it, but my drawing was really not going well at all. But I don't think anybody would have noticed.
No.
But I just wasn't happy with it. So in the end, I had to invent cobbles on the street at the bottom, because you just had a really smooth tarmac road, and that space just wasn't working. So I invented cobbles, but my excuse was to everybody, let's just put cobbles in because it'll look really, really good, not the fact that my picture's looking absolutely crap and I'm going to ruin it. So little tricks like that I can always pull out of the bag, and and sometimes it might be there's a bit of space on the left hand side, so I'll look, and 50 yards over to the left there's a fire hydrant, so we'll bring the fire hydrant into that space. Or there might be a sign that's facing the wrong way, so I'll turn it the right way. Not the right way to direct the traffic, because if the traffic tried to follow it, they'd all crash. But if I turn it the right way, it works better for my picture. So I'm always, and I'll take windows out, I'll put windows in, I'll put extra doorways in. I might be walking back from the location and I'll spot a pigeon, and I get my sketchbook out and I stick that pigeon into my drawing that I did 100 yards back down the road.
Yeah. Ian,
So they're all like little tricks I pull out of the bag, which probably goes completely against the urban sketching philosophy.
Well, I mean, you're sketching what you see. So in that moment in time, you just don't see it right in front of you. The fire hydrant's actually over there. Okay, so to answer Rude's question, to comment and add on to Rude's question about going outside your comfort zone, I would like to raise the issue of people, sketching people.
Yeah.
And I remember sketching with you in that jazz club in New Orleans, and you were sketching those jazz musicians, and it was fantastic. But I think that probably wasn't your comfort zone.
I was pissed.
What's that?
I was pissed. These.
Look at that. Is that fantastic? Wait, let me make it a bigger view for people. Is that fantastic? Oh my gosh. That's fantastic. And I've seen you do several other sketches since then of people in coffee shops, and there was no alcohol involved. Well, okay, maybe there was that night, but
you see, I have done a few pictures of people in pubs, because obviously during the winter time over here we can't get out that much, so we do a lot of interiors, and the urban sketching group, the Liverpool group, meet up in the pubs, and I've done a few kind of interiors. But I can't go up to somebody and just kind of like sneakily draw them. I have to go up and say, excuse me, do you mind if I draw you? Is that okay? And they're all like, they're really pleased. Their faces light up. I say, if you don't mind, I'm just going to draw you. So I draw them first, and then I frame their portrait with the rest of the scene. So they become the subject. So rather than it being the subject, the scene, and then they just populate it afterwards as an afterthought, I do it the other way around. I have to draw them. They have to be the focal point, and then they're framed by the actual interior of the pub.
Right.
I can't do it the other way around.
Yeah.
They have to become the subject for me. And I did one of this couple in this pub in Liverpool, and they were just so pleased when I asked them, and they sat there for about 20 minutes, and I said, look, it doesn't matter, you don't have to pose for me, just carry on, eating your crisps and drinking your drinks and stuff. But I think they insisted on staying really, really still. And what they didn't realize was really that they were just part of it, because mainly I was focusing on the interior. I was doing the bar in the background and the chandeliers and everything. And then after about half an hour I showed it to them, and their faces just dropped and they just legged it out the pub. It was so funny.
Oh my gosh, that is good. So just for people who maybe joined the call a little bit late, Ian is taking questions. If you want to ask the question, you have to send me a Facebook Messenger. So find my Brenda Murray profile on Facebook, and you can type your question in the chat box there, and I'm reading them out. I'm sorry we've had to disable everybody's cameras and microphones because of Zoom bombing, but that's how you can ask the question. So I saw somebody had their hand up and they wanted to ask, but unfortunately you have to do it through that way. And I do have another question for you, Ian. Paula wants to know, is there any particular reason why you don't usually include people in your sketches?
Paula, that is a brilliant question. How long have we got for that? How long have we got?
Oh, we have all the time that we need.
Okay, right. Can I show you this picture? I mean, this is not a home sketch, but this is this one?
Yes.
Okay. So this is my latest drawing. I did this yesterday, and this is Porto, and my pictures are full of people, but you just can't see them because they've just moved. They've just walked off the page.
Okay.
So if you can imagine, right, I'm sitting in Porto drawing this scene. Okay, I'm drawing that, and I'm there for like 2.5 hours. So in that time, I'm going to see about 100 people, but they're not going to keep still because they're very kind of transient. So I'm drawing past them. I'm drawing the space that they occupy. I'm drawing the things that don't move. I'm drawing the buildings. So it's a bit like I'm drawing a stage set, and the actors have all just gone off for a wee, or for a smoke, or for a coffee. So I draw past the people. But what I do is I draw the scene with all the references to the people. So I make sure the windows and the steps and the cobbles and the pathway and, you know, and the church where they can go and worship, everything is there for them, but they're just not there at that particular moment in time. And the other reason, and this is probably the most serious reason, because there's lots of reasons why I don't do it. The most serious reason is that my drawings are a record of me looking at something for, say, 2.5 hours. So that's what's there.
Right.
2.5 hours. Not the people. The people are only there for 2 minutes and then they buggered off when got an ice cream or when got pissed or something. So that's the main reason.
That's it.
And then the other reason is I'm not very good at doing it.
No, you are. You are. And so those people sketches that you started doing in New Orleans during our workshop there, you've posted them on your Instagram account, right?
Probably, yeah.
I think so. So if people want to see them, if they came late or if they didn't quite see it, go to the Ian Fennelly's Instagram account and you can see them there. So let's have a look at some of your other interior sketches. There we go.
Okay, so this is my dining room, and I was having a glass of wine, as you can see. In fact, it looks like I'm having 3 glasses of wine. So we're talking about perspective. If you look at the lines that radiate away from you on the table, which shows you, you know, the 5 planks of wood which the table's made up of, getting those lines right. I mean, it wasn't tricky, but it was something you had to be very mindful of to make sure it was accurate, because obviously that's kind of taking you into the picture. You know, they're almost like railway track lines that guide you along, and they visually invite you into the picture. So you then focus on the wall behind, and then from the wall you can then go left or you can go right. So it goes back to the point I made before about the perspective is there, it's inherent and it's important, but ultimately it's about guiding you around the picture. And sometimes you'll maybe get it wrong, or well, I'll get it wrong, but not in a kind of conscious way, but more to do subconsciously. So if you look at the bottom left-hand corner and you can see the skirting board that comes towards you, really it should go much further away. It should go further off the edge of the page rather than coming down. And that just gives it a little bit of tension. And I quite like that. And the same thing happens on the right-hand side as well. If you look at the bottom of the fire surrounds, there's a little bit of tension there because the perspective is very much exaggerated. Mm-hmm. And I like that. It just gives a kind of unsettling quality, which probably deep down inside is channeling things like, you know, being stuck inside, not being able to get out, not being in Texas. So rather than being in Texas, where am I? I'm sitting in my dining room, drawing.
Yeah. I have another question for you from Karina. She says, is there an ugly stage when you think your sketch is ugly in your work, and how do you motivate yourself to push through this?
That's such a great question. Yeah. There's probably step 1 is an ugly stage, because step 1 is just shaping everything else. Step 2 isn't great, although it's definitely an improvement on step 1. And then step 3, it really bombs. It kind of just drops down completely. When you put the paint on, they really do look like a dog's bum. And I get loads of people when I'm working on location, even when I'm doing workshops and I'm surrounded by students, I get loads of people that come up to me and they always seem to gravitate around where my picture is at its lowest points. And that is step 3. That's when I put the paint on, because the paint's all over the show, you know, and they come around and they say, are you an artist? And I say, yeah. And they just shake their heads and they walk away and they go off to the shops.
Yeah.
But they never come back 2 hours later when it looks good. You know, when it's finished, when it's all the details gone on. So even this one looked like a dog's bum when I put the paint on. But because I've done it before, and because I know it's a process, and it's very much a layering process, you have to go through this step, and this step. And you know that the steps that come after the painting are going to tidy it up and refine it and just make it more realistic and give it more 3 dimensions, then you don't worry about that because you have faith in the process. And sometimes, going back to what Ruud said before, you have to challenge yourself. So I quite like making things quite chaotic, because I know the layering process is going to tidy things up again. So I quite like that. So the answer to that particular question, yeah, most of the time it just looks an absolute mess, but I just enjoy that. I kind of enjoy it. I keep on pushing through, and it only really comes together till right at the very end, because I never have one particular part of my picture finished. Every part of the picture is always at the same stage of completion or sort of incompletion.
Yeah. You know, I remember this. I think I said this before when we were filming the Layers of Looking online workshop. And you did the first stage, you did the second stage, and you swapped all this paint on. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to have to refilm the whole thing. But now I realize this is part of his process. He knows exactly what he's doing. His goal is to scare Brenda to death. And then but it all comes together at the end because it really isn't about the paint so much. I really learned a lot from that. So that's really cool. So Anita is asking, Ian, do you only do freehand lines? And I'll pop up a picture so we can look at that. So I guess the question really is, do you ever use a ruler?
No, never. Oh, this used to be my studio. This is up in the attic now. So when this was built,
do you play the banjo?
Yeah, I play the banjo. That one next to it is actually a 12 string, but it only looks like a 6 string, but I couldn't be bothered putting 6 of the other strings in. So that's a 12 string. Yeah, I play guitar, but I'm not very good, but I do play.
And you play banjo?
I'm better at drawing and painting, but I do play guitar. I often kind of use the guitar just as a way of chilling out in between, you know, painting and drawing and stuff. Yeah. So this used to be my studio. This was built as my studio. And if you look out that window, you can just see the beach. So it's a really nice spot. It's a great location. So in answer to the question before about do I use anything else other than my hand to show a straight line? No, everything's freehand. I never use a ruler or anything like that because I kind of don't see the world in straight lines. I see the world in much more dramatic lines, much more expressive lines. I like wonky lines. I like lines going for a walk. And I don't walk in a straight line. I kind of, you know, turn the corner and go off in a different direction, and I wobble, and sometimes I fall over. And that's kind of, you know, that's life. That's how lines are. So I don't see a straight line, even though, you know, in terms of architectural references, things are straight. So if you look at this particular one, you can see the panel at the back, and you've got that door. Now, if you look at the two kind of yellowy little handles, if you look at the line in between them, that is perfectly straight, because that kind of has to be straight. Because if it wasn't straight, it would just be a bit odd. But the line above that, the horizontal line at the top, that wobbles a little bit. And then if you go a little bit further up and you've got all those kind of beams, those wooden beams, well, they're sort of straightish, but they've got a lot more drama and expressiveness to them because they wobble a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I do straight lines, and I can draw a straight line if I wanted to, but I try and often choose not to.
Yeah, well, there's more charm in the line if it isn't perfectly straight.
Yeah.
So people are asking, Della, remember Della from New Orleans?
Hey, Della.
Hey, Della. Della's asking that have you discovered anything while drawing in your house that you never noticed before?
That's a great question. Yeah, I have. I mean, I've not sort of discovered, like, I've not discovered, oh my God, there's a couch. I never noticed that couch, although I've been living in the house for 20 years. It's not that. I mean, because I know all the stuff in my house. I know the content of the house. But I suppose you discover the certain things are actually quite charming in themselves. You know, there's a real personality to some of the things and the spaces that you occupy, especially that last one, I suppose, the one of the studio. I mean, it actually looks really cozy, and it is cozy, and you don't realize how cozy it is sometimes unless you're forced to look at it and construct it and piece it all together. It's actually very long, so I'm kind of sitting halfway, and then behind me there's a staircase, and there's a brick wall, and then there's some other furniture as well. There's actually a huge big double bass just behind me that belongs to my son. But yeah, I mean, I suppose you discover the charm of the space that you're in, and And I like those little spotlights. Can you see the 3 spotlights at the top?
Mm-hmm.
They're really kind of important in that picture, because obviously they occupy that space and they animate it and they just give it a nice little visual interest at the top. And it kind of just forces you to notice things and see things. And then those spotlights, they then kind of bounce off the handles of the cupboard that I talked about before. And then that little bit of furniture that the TV sits on, they've got the same kind of handles. And then there's more handles over on the left-hand side, just behind the banjo. And then the banjo is sitting on like a little stand with little round bits at the front. So all those little things are just bouncing off each other. And I suppose in answer to Zella's question, that's what you notice. You notice the charm of the space that you're in and how all things kind of knit together. And then the stripes, I suppose the stripes on that couch, which are there to emphasize the perspective and actually take you into the picture. By the way, that couch isn't stripy.
Oh, you made that up?
Yeah, I made it up to make the picture look better.
Yeah, why not?
And also there was a cushion on there as well that had spots on, and it was just a plain cushion.
Oh, that's funny.
All right. Urban sketching cheating.
Yes. Everyone, thank you so much for popping in today and chatting with us. If you are looking for something to do, you want some inspiration, I want to encourage you to take Ian Fennelly's online workshop called Layers of Looking. That's available at www.studio56boutique.com. And there's another workshop there as well. Our first one was with Oliver Holler called Design on the Fly, and that's also available. And there's more workshops in the works. Are there not, Ian?
There will be. I mean, I'm working on quite a few at the moment, and they're going to be really cool. I'm really excited about them, because obviously they're not like the Layers of Looking one, because I couldn't do another one of those now because I'd get arrested for being outside. So they're all studio based. So I've got the camera above the piece of paper, and I'm just explaining everything in lots of steps. And it's great because there's no distractions. It's just me talking, and I can really kind of home in on all the techniques, especially the color. I can describe the color journey and how all the colors come together, really clearly as well. So yeah, I'm excited about them. They're great fun, and it kind of keeps you busy. It stops you from playing the banjo as well, because that kind of really upsets the neighbours when they see me pick my banjo up. They all kind of go inside. They don't sit out in the garden anymore. So it keeps me busy.
You have to promise me the next time we do a live streaming video chat that you'll start off with a little banjo.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I promise. I promise. I promise. Yeah.
So the date of our next our guest, and the date and the guests of our next live streaming interview is going to be posted on the Studio 56 Boutique Facebook page. So check back there. These interviews are recorded, and they are also going to be uploaded to the Studio 56 Facebook page and the Studio 56 YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and see some of those sketches again and just check, what did he say about color? You can rewatch those videos then. Thank you so much, Ian, for joining us, and thank you everybody else who tuned in. Hey, everyone, take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of your neighbors, and don't worry, just relax, make your art, and better days are on the horizon.
Oh,
take care, everyone.
That's
Thank
great.
you again.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Keep safe and stay at home.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.